Hello, everybody. There's the camera. So this is part something of this series. I don't really exactly remember where I am with in terms of how many videos I've done so far about answering this atheist's questions. Um, I almost have remembered his name, but it is the Friendly Atheist. I think maybe he's changed his name since then, but either way. I skipped a few questions about prayer because I've already answered. I've already done like three or four videos just saying the same thing about prayer because uh, atheists like prayer a lot. I guess I don't know. But so I skipped. Which ones did I skip? I think it was 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. So those were about five questions. Well, the last one was pretty interesting. I'll sort of mention it a little bit. It says that is it possible that prayer has no supernatural effect? And it was another one that sort of went hand in hand. If I found this out, then would I admit it? And then obviously you would admit it. Christians I mean, it is very possible that Christians are very similar to the vast majority of everyone else in that they will sort of once they find out something is false in their belief system that they'll more or less just double down on it. And yeah, I can definitely see that happening. But the Christians that are more part of the like scholarly community, I don't know. I haven't seen that sort of issue. I think Christians they just follow a certain set of presuppositions that are not familiar to atheists, and so, or maybe they are, and as because some atheists have come out of atheism, but for some reason, once they leave Christianity, they lose all sort of uh, capacity to understand the presuppositions Christians are working on, which it's really interesting, but whatever. It's like, come on, like I can understand where an atheist is coming from because I understand which presuppositions you guys are working on, and in turn, I can draw the same conclusions if I were to follow those assumptions. But I am not operating off of those assumptions, so I just don't understand how someone who actually switches and they've experienced both sides in complete belief can uh, not understand where the other side is coming from. But either way, that's beside the point. If Is it possible that prayer has absolutely no supernatural effect? Of course, it's possible. I mean, that's like it, it's possible that God doesn't exist. I think it's highly improbable that God doesn't exist, highly unlikely, but it's possible. It's like maybe one in a billion chance, something like that, maybe even less than that. Um, so if God doesn't exist, and then if God is not the Christian God who answers prayers or is intimately linked and emotionally invested into His creation, then yeah, prayer would have no supernatural effect. And then of course, even if prayer didn't have any supernatural effect, that doesn't prove that God doesn't exist. So the argument is really just a mute argument. It just is sort of let's see. I don't know what a proper analogy would be. It's basically you just throwing darts at a buffalo, and you're saying, "Haha, the buffalo's dead now." Which I mean, that's all of the prayer arguments. Like, okay, you prove that we don't understand prayer that well. Is that really what turned you away from atheism? Because that's like, or sorry, away from Christianity. Because that's like what you didn't read the Bible once. Come on. Okay. Um, or you didn't first. It's like I listened to Jordan Peterson a little bit, and one thing that he mentioned in one of his videos, I want to cite this properly so you guys can go look at it. I don't remember the number of the videos, or which number in the series it was, but it was Maps of Meaning, one of those, and he was talking about how the best problem, or the best solution for a problem, or the first solution for a problem that we actually look into shouldn't be the most drastic problem, like changing our entire belief structure, but it should be more like the simpler problem, like maybe uh, looking at one particular part of our belief structure, saying, well, I was wrong about that, so maybe that's all that really is wrong. And then maybe look into other stuff and see if you're wrong about those. Um, but, you know, it jumping from just pure theism to atheism is like, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not how it goes. Either way. To the fun questions. Let's see, question 23 and 24. I'll be back. Question 23 is talking about why, let's see, what was it? Da, da. It was, if, is it, oh yeah, yeah, do I ever doubt God's existence? And the second one is, uh, if I did, I think if I did, would I admit it? I'm pretty sure that's what the second question was, or the 23rd and 24th question. And to the first question, yeah, I think every Christian does. I mean, every honest Christian who thinks about these issues, every Christian I've asked at least has doubted God's existence at one point or another. It's just, doubts are typically found in the form of questions, in my opinion. And the great thing about questions is that there are answers. So, what I have noticed about an atheist is every atheist I've asked, and I've seen other people ask like huge swaths of atheists, and they'll ask the atheist, "Do you ever doubt your atheism? Like, do you ever doubt that maybe there is a God?" And it's like no atheist doubts their own position, and I think that's a dangerous place to be because that means you're never growing. So a Christian, they'll doubt their position, and then they'll look into it, or they'll think really hard about it, and they'll come to the conclusion that they were right, or maybe they'll adjust it a little bit. And that means their position is continually built upon and it becomes stronger and stronger. But if an atheist doesn't do that, then, well, you get these stupid questions that, you know, frankly, a lot of them are stupid. And um, it you you get what Descartes called scialism, where basically an atheist thinks they know more than they actually do, and I think that's very true on a lot of fronts. I mean, I've definitely seen that sort of attitude within Richard Dawkins and the Four Horsemen. Sam Harris is pretty good about that. He has a fairly robust philosophy regarding a lot of things, at least from what I've understood that he says. I haven't read any of his books, but I've seen him talk a lot. Um, Richard Dawkins, I've seen him just torn apart, as well as Christopher Hitchens. Um, I haven't seen a whole lot from Daniel Dennett and various other atheists. Those are just the most popular ones that I've seen. Stephen Hawkins also has been torn apart. So it's like once you're really good in one particular field, you believe that you're really good in other particular fields. Like if you're Stephen Hawkins and you're really good at cosmology, you then think that you can go beyond your realm of expertise and delve into theology and just be like, yep, theology doesn't matter. Or you're Richard Dawkins, you're really good at evolutionary biology. I think it's evolutionary microbiology is his degree is in. And then you think, yep, I can just claim that an entire discipline is obsolete because of what I know in my field of knowledge. When you have the other people just being like, no, you don't understand what you're talking about. And that's a real big issue in I guess, the atheistic community. I know Christians do that too. Like especially certain people who will sort of Like we have that issue with evolution, of course, when most Christians who disagree with evolution can't even explain what the theory is, or that there are multiple types of evolution. And I'm not talking about the how they normally have it structured, but like they don't know the difference between Darwinism, neo-Darwinism, and the actual issues with them, um, and then the actual evidence is for them. So Christians have that issue as well, but they don't go saying throw out biology. And that's what Richard Dawkins is doing. He's saying he's a biologist and he's saying throw out theology because it's a meaningless thing. I've even heard him say throw out philosophy, which is, yeah, well, either way, that to me, that's what happens when you begin to, or when you never doubt your own position, because you think, of course, you're right about everything. And then if someone brings up information that says that you're wrong, then you typically will just double down on your position. And I've seen this in my online debates and personal debates with atheists as well. One atheist I was talking about was talking about consciousness, and he was saying that consciousness is only in the mind. And I said, well, there are actually multiple theories. There's dualistic, and then there's naturalistic positions that you can take, and there are thought experiments and a bit of evidence to suggest that our minds are not in our brains, or at least they are in part in our brains, but then in part in some sort of other place that is not quite certain. And so it was basically just an anti-naturalistic position that I was taking, and he didn't really respond to me after that. Um, and so, well, first he doubled down, and then when I presented the facts, it was like, well, okay, I'm not going to talk to that guy anymore. I guess I don't know. I don't know. I want to assume the best in the people I talk to, but it's like uh, it just was disappointing that he didn't have any more evidence for his position besides just the more elementary arguments. Um, so yeah, I guess for those two questions, that's about it. Yeah, Christians, they typically, and then me. Oh yeah, me. I actually really interesting. Uh, well, maybe not interesting to you. It's interesting to me, so I'm gonna talk about it for a little bit. Give me a couple minutes here. um, so recently, I've actually come to a couple like changes in my mindset, in my worldview. Like for instance, I was a lot more what do you call it? So there's in biblical infallibility and biblical inerrancy. So I used to be very biblical inerrant person. I used to be much more of a fundamentalist. Um, but then the whole, uh, you know, I didn't know what biblical infallibility was, and because I didn't know how to term it, but I thought that it meant biblical inerrancy. And basically, I said not everything in the Bible is correct in the same way that we interpret it to be correct, because we are living in a place and time that doesn't have all the information that they had, and we don't have the same mindset that they had. And so when the Bible said, oh yeah, and there are arguments in the Bible. So how can every word in the Bible be correct when there are actually multiple sides represented? And then every apostle actually had a different position. They had different theological positions, and they weren't some monolithic, homogenous group of people. But the things that they decided on as a group, you could say, are doctrine for Christians. Sure, but they do hold different positions, and they articulate it in different ways. For instance, John, the Apostle John, he was a very, you could say, Kabbalistic Jew, and maybe Paul was too. But Paul spoke a lot more from in the Peshat on the Peshat level. So so that was something that you have to sort of contend with. And then I also started coming to terms with the whole idea of evolution, and I'm sort of on the fence about it. But the Bible really doesn't say much about the physical history of the Earth, even in Genesis, which that's another thing as well. Is like what is the purpose of the Bible? Because, you know, in ancient Egypt, they believed that the firmament was a giant woman um, doing the reverse spider walk over the earth. And they didn't see that as physically literal. Like their cosmology was never physically literal. Maybe some people interpreted it that way, but I don't think that's how it was meant to be interpreted. So when, for instance, you don't see stories of ancient Egyptians going up outside and saying, I don't think that mythology is correct. People will say, why? You say, well, I don't see any belly buttons up there. Okay, yeah. Because they didn't see it as a physical truth in the same way that we do. They didn't see things scientifically. And then I know that this guy that I'm answering questions from, he's also cited a reason why the Bible is written badly is because there is no scientific things in it, which there are. For instance, there's a lot of science coming out that meat is good for you. And I was a lifelong vegetarian, like for 21 years. And then I read in the Bible, well, meat is actually a commanded part of our diet. So I started eating meat, and then later I found out that scientifically speaking, there's a lot of evidence that meat and cooked food is good for you. So that that as well, like it's God was talking to scientifically illiterate people, so he did think you have to look at the practical implications of the things that God was laying down in order to understand what sciences he's talking about. For instance, the commandments for how to respond to leprosy. Well, what were they doing? They were quarantining them. They were waiting for it to go away. They would do various other rituals and stuff. But then you look at what we do with people with, I think, with not, it was, I forgot exactly what it was. I read this a long time ago. But we do a lot of the same thing, and there was actually a doctor who was able to read that and predict what that leprosy was from what the Bible's what type of disease it was from what the Bible described we should do to cure it, and he was right apparently. So there are little things like that in more of the practical ways that the Bible is walked out, and because God was talking to scientifically illiterate people. On the other hand, there is science in the Bible, but the Bible is not a science textbook. That's why it's an infallible book. It's not an inerrant book. And then when it comes to cosmology, God was never intending, because he was talking, again, not to cosmologists of the 21st century. He was talking to ancient mythologians, if that's the word, of 1500 BC, and they did not view any cosmology as um, physically accurate, maybe to a degree, but it was more of a spiritual storytelling of the teleology of the universe and the hierarchical structure. Nothing more than that, from what I can tell. Maybe I'll be able to expand my position later with more information, but that's as far as I can tell. And that you could say, well, there's no science in the textbook, and that means they were really stupid when it comes to science. Sure. Or there's no science in the Bible. And yeah, God was talking to people who were not intelligent when it came to science, but they were good at other stuff. You see, we are very scientifically minded, so we are very good at science, and we are not very good at whatever they were good at. Whatever that is, I'm at a loss for explanation as to what it is, but that's a good thing to look into. Whatever they were really good at. Oh yeah, one example is memory. Those guys, because they were illiterate, they could remember things really well. Like they had people who could read, not read, but they could be told things that amounted to textbooks and stuff, and just remember them verbatim. That's crazy. And that to think that we could do that, but that's because we are living in the information age where information is just readily available to us, and we can just go look it up, and it's at our fingertips. It wasn't like that for them, so their environment required that they were able to do that, and their environment, being an unscientific environment, also required them to do other certain things that we are not good at today, because we do live in a scientific world that causes us to be really good at science, but we've lost whatever they're good at. And someday I'll probably figure out what that was with study and research, and I can come back and tell you guys. So until then, either way, I think that is the end. I didn't expect to go another 10 minutes. Yeah, I guess a challenge to atheists would just be, do you ever doubt your atheism? And if not, why? If so, um, what do you do about it? Because I don't want to say like what do or why, like would you tell anybody? Because of course you would. Sorry, brothers. Of course you would. Um, or maybe you wouldn't. That doesn't even matter. That's like just trying to undermine the honesty of a person and therefore their integrity, and therefore undermine all of their arguments. And I think that's a logical fallacy. But what I want to know more is what would you do about it if your atheism was wrong? And I don't want the stupid. Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. Have a good day, everybody.